I'm a pastor. Of course, I believe that all lives matter, but right now, black lives are the ones under attack.
Right. All lives matter, but the black ones matter more. Not Asian lives, Mexican lives, Indian lives, Middle Eastern lives, or white lives. None of those have a more important struggle than the black one. Is anyone tired of this yet? Is anyone tired of the female pastor with the LGBTQ sash and her openly racist tier of which race matters the most? I think people actually are, especially when it comes to BLM, because some of the most outspoken people against Black Lives Matter right now are actually black people.
BLM is a scam. It was literally a scam. They had bought mansions and...
Now, BLM didn't start with this, but they are probably the most famous right now for defending George Floyd and causing massive riots over a guy who was about to drive while intoxicated on fentanyl. If you actually watch the arrest video, which it seems like nobody who supports BLM did, he is very obviously on drugs and could have easily fallen asleep at the wheel and plowed his car into multiple people. Most importantly, none of the drama would have even happened if he wasn't very actively resisting arrest in the face of cops who are trying to accommodate him.
Could you please crack it for me, please?
Yes, I'll crack it.
Stay with me, man.
I will.
Please stay with me, man. Thank you.
Listen.
Dang, man.
Listen.
I'm not that kind of guy.
I'll roll the windows down
Please,
and put your legs in, all right? I'll put the air on.
Stop.
So because of the relentless false narratives, open and belligerent racism against white people, and the physical damage from riots that's been done to many different communities, more and more people are starting to reject all of the race baiting that traditionally has worked very well. And proof of this comes in the form of an event that BLM and other forces are trying to turn into a race war, which brings us to a track meet in Frisco, Texas on Wednesday, April 2nd, 2025. A 17-year-old high school student named Karmelo Anthony stabbed and killed another 17-year-old named Austin Metcalf. After this happened, a Give, Send, Go fundraiser was made to help with Karmelo's legal defense, and it raised hundreds of thousands of dollars with supporters of Karmelo and BLM activists not only saying a bunch of racist shit and approving of the murder, but also saying that Karmelo is innocent of wrongdoing because the stabbing was self-defense. Now, I agree that everyone deserves their day in court, and Karmelo deserves due process. However, after reading the police report, the likelihood that this will qualify as self-defense in court is almost zero. I'll be adding some extra context to the report, but here it is. There was a light drizzle outside during the track meet, and the officer reported that Karmelo was under a tent that was designated for a different school. Because of that, Austin Metcalf, the victim, and his brother Hunter Metcalf asked Karmelo to leave. Karmelo refused to leave and responded by saying, "Touch me and see what happens." After continuing to refuse to leave, at some point Karmelo is pushed by the victim, Austin, and then he follows up by saying, "Punch me and see what happens." Last, Karmelo stabs Austin Metcalf, runs away, and ditches the murder weapon. Now, there are a couple of different versions of the story with slight alterations, so I'll let Austin's brother, Hunter, who was standing right next to him, say what happened.
Your mom told me that you were there.
Yes, ma'am.
If you don't mind, what happened?
There was this kid, before I knew his name now, this kid was sitting under our tent at track. We asked him to move. He started getting aggressive and talking reckless. And my brother stepped in and said, "You need to move." He's like, "Make me move." Austin grabbed his backpack. The kid, I tried to whip around as fast as I could, but I didn't see the stab. And I look at my brother, and I'm not going to talk about the rest. So that's just what I saw.
So to argue for self-defense in Texas, your life has to be in immediate danger. Now, the BLM types will point out that the two Metcalf brothers were quite a bit larger than Karmelo, and that's why his life was in danger. However, this happened in broad daylight and a ton of people were around, and the Metcalf brothers showed no intent of using heavy or lethal force.
There was never a punch even thrown. So I don't care. There was never a phone broken. We've never had contact with this individual ever.
Not only that, but let's bring up that statute again. In the law, it says that if you provoke the person who you used lethal force against, which Karmelo reportedly did, then you can't claim it's self-defense. So in my amateur internet lawyer opinion, Karmelo is screwed. You don't get to stab someone because they picked up your bag and pushed you after you asked them to put hands on you. I mean, if someone got stabbed every time a kid was pushed when I was in school, then at least half the student population wouldn't have lived to see graduation.
Doesn't make any sense. I mean, that's just because the kid was mad, my son is not here anymore, and I don't understand it.
Right, that's what it sounds like. He was looking for a fight or looking to steal people's unprotected items like this commenter said. He ended up causing that fight and then used lethal force because he was mad. And now not only is this 17-year-old kid permanently scarred from having to watch his twin brother die while frantically trying to keep him alive, But Karmelo also emotionally scarred everyone close to Austin Metcalf.
My other son is just crushed. And I feel for him now, and he'll never be the same. None of us will. Grief, we all go through it, but the thing about grief is you don't get over it. You just learn to live with it.
Yeah, I don't think you ever really get over your son dying or your brother dying or your best friend dying. I've known plenty of people who've had those they were close to die, and they still aren't over it like a decade later or more. So understand why a lot of people are outraged that Karmelo's school still wants to allow him to graduate, despite the fact that even if he did get off with a self-defense charge, which he almost certainly won't, he still brought a weapon to school and started a fight, which is easy grounds for expulsion. Why should he get to graduate after breaking school rules when Austin Metcalf will never get to graduate? And so because Karmelo is almost certainly guilty of murder unless there's some info that we're unaware of, the racial grift must begin to try to beat the charges. And the grift is quite ridiculous. I mean, Karmelo and his legal team are some of the dumbest criminals on the planet. You can read the full police report where it says that an officer called Karmelo the alleged suspect, followed by Karmelo spontaneously saying, "I'm not alleged, I did it." Literally confessed to a murder right in front of the police. Even worse for Karmelo's defense, his family picked some black activist lawyer named Dominic Alexander, who I swear is just like that race-grifting character from that episode of the Boondocks, where they tried to bully the school for $500,000 because a teacher said the N-word.
I have a message for the Woodcrest School District.
Bravo, good love. What's that two-bit hustler doing here?
You have assaulted this fine family's dignity, you have assassinated their pride, and you have hurt their feelings. Now, somebody gonna pay.
Don't listen to him, Granddad. He just wants to use us to give press for a stupid sitcom on BET.
The scary thing is that this episode of the Boondocks is almost 20 years old, and it still applies like it was written yesterday. So Karmelo's lawyer and his activist group hold this press conference to, I guess, give everyone a more positive outlook on the defendant. Let's take a look.
Y'all, I'm Minister Dominic Alexander. I serve as the president of the Next Generation Action Network. Today I come before you with a heavy heart, but determined in spirit, not just as an advocate, but as a black man. Black people in America don't have to pull the race card. I ain't pulling no race card, I live it. I'm reminded all the time that I'm a black man in America.
I mean, if you don't want to be reminded of your race, then maybe you shouldn't open up your speech with, "as a black man," as you use this press conference to promote your race-based activist group.
This is not just about Karmelo. It's about the family who dared to stand and demand justice in a return and receive ugliness that racism in this country still breeds. As the president of the Next Generation Action Network, we will never ask the oppressor for permission to liberate our people. We are not scared. We are not moving.
Wait, did I just hear a smoke detector beep?
We are not moving.
Anyway, I love how the family of the killer's immediate legal strategy is to poison the culture into a race war in the hopes of getting special treatment from the legal system. Real generous of you to not only harm the Metcalfs with this event, but also the entirety of America. You guys are real assholes. This is despite the fact that Austin's father, Jeff Metcalf, who is actually a victim, who was actually wronged, and has been swatted multiple times over this event, went on the news earlier before this press conference saying that he didn't want to escalate this by making it about race.
This is not a race issue. This is not a black and white issue. I don't want someone stepping up on a soapbox trying to politicize this. I've already forgiven the person who stabbed him. God's going to take care of everything. And if we all don't come together, black, white, yellow, brown, I don't care. It's all about human beings.
Wow, I don't know how many visits to a church it takes to get that kind of peaceful mentality, but if it was my kid, I wouldn't have been so nice. Actually, Jeff Metcalf happened to show up to the Karmelo press conference to, I guess, break bread and pray with him in the hopes of making peace and showing unity. But of course, Karmelo's team's legal strategy is to increase division, so they didn't want Jeff Metcalf there, and Karmelo's lawyer handles his presence at the conference in the worst possible way.
What we've seen at the beginning of this press conference, the father being at this press conference, is a disrespect to the dignity of his son. Next Generation Action Network.
Right. Don't forget to plug the name of your organization 20 more times while the cameras are rolling.
From the beginning, has respected the loss of life. And all I'm going to say, So it don't be asked later. As that was disrespectful, who is not invited, he knows that it's inappropriate to be near this family. But he did it. We were asking him repeatedly to leave. And literally, he wouldn't even talk. He wouldn't even say anything. He felt like he could just stand there. It was very upsetting to me.
Now, what I find curious about this here is how the victim's father was asked to leave the area, and he was able to do that without killing anyone. The irony here is just great. But anyway, this press conference is full of Karmelo's family playing the victim, trying to increase racial tension, and telling a number of lies. Here's a lie that I found to be the most ridiculous while they were talking about Karmelo's right to a trial.
He should be afforded the same rights that Kyle Rittenhouse had. Nobody in the public media has one video camera, but we got the video of Kyle Rittenhouse with an AK-47 shooting 3 people in the back. We got that. And he raised more than $2 million publicly, and nobody said anything.
I mean, I agree that Karmelo deserves his day in court and deserves to argue in his defense, but that statement about Kyle Rittenhouse was so factually inaccurate that they should have fired that lawyer right on the spot for saying it. Not only did he say the wrong gun, but Kyle shot 3 people in the back? Bro, there is literally evidence of the first guy threatening to kill Kyle with a weapon before he was shot. You also have video of Kyle being chased and violently assaulted by a mob, and you have Gage Grosskreutz testifying in court that he had a loaded firearm aimed at Kyle before he was shot.
Mr. Grosskreutz, I'm going to show you what has been marked as Exhibit 67. That's a photo of you, yes?
Yes.
Okay. That's Mr. Rittenhouse?
Correct.
Okay. Now, you'd agree your firearm is pointed at Mr. Rittenhouse, correct?
Yes.
Okay. When you were standing 3 to 5 feet from him with your arms up in the air, he never fired, right?
Correct.
It wasn't until you pointed your gun at him, advanced on him, with your gun, now your hands down, pointed at him, that he fired, right?
Correct.
After I heard Karmelo's lawyer say that stuff about Kyle, I just started laughing. You can't get something that factually wrong and call yourself a lawyer. You'll get destroyed in a courtroom. But good news for everyone who wants justice for Austin Metcalf, though I guess all this makes sense when you consider that this lawyer has been arrested multiple times, one of them being for violently abusing and hospitalizing a 2-year-old, so Karmelo's family literally picked the worst possible man to argue in his defense.
My name is Kayla Hayes. I am the mother of Karmelo Anthony. He's been raised in a 2-parent home with structure, stability, love, and we put God first in everything that we do.
If he's really from a 2-parent home with stability, why do you have different last names? Something's being left out here. Also, why do you look like you're under 30 with a 17-year-old? How old were you when you had him? Lots of questions here. Anyway, again, more and more people are getting really tired of everything being called racist, especially when that's being used to cover up a crime. And because of that, a situation that happened on the week of April 28th, 2025, involving a white woman named Shiloh Hendrix, became a huge event because she was recorded in a park saying some offensive words. Now understand that in order to make this next video YouTube friendly, I have to censor some stuff, so know that anytime that the audio is cut, it's because the N-word is being said.
Did you call him the child?
The fuck you talking
Did you
about?
call the child the word?
None of your fucking business.
It is my own business. You call him a nigger? Okay, why don't you have the boss to say it right now again?
Fuck you,
Okay.
I love how the guy's big issue was that the N-word was said in front of children, as he immediately proceeds to not only say the N-word a number of times, but also encourages the woman to repeat the word.
All right, that's what you say.
You don't go digging through people's shit, you dumb fuck.
Nobody dig into your shit.
A little fucking kid just did, you dumbass.
That little kid, you call him a nigger?
Yeah.
The little child?
What if he acts like one, he's gonna...
Are you about to hit him? You chase him here?
He took my son's stuff.
So that gives you the right to call the child, 5-year-old, and the N-word.
If that's what he's gonna act
That's
like.
what you're gonna call him.
That's what he's gonna act like.
You know, that's a hate speech. And you can be recorded for that.
I don't give a shit.
Huh.
Yes, you can definitely be recorded if you say something in public. However, hate speech is not a thing in America, and contrary to what social media is trying to get everyone to believe, saying the N-word is not illegal. This guy better hope it's not, because he said it a bunch of times. Unless he's saying that laws should apply differently based on race, And I could have sworn that America went through a whole civil rights movement to make such things illegal. Anyway, what happened was that a black child tried to take something from this lady Shiloh's bag, and in retaliation, she called him the N-word. Now, is it wrong to call a kid a racial slur? Of course it is. Is it illegal? Well, I'm not a lawyer, but probably not. Kids get called names all the time by adults, and I don't think that people are being arrested left and right for that. The cops are more concerned with did you hit them or engage in extreme verbal abuse like screaming or threatening them. Now, should Shiloh receive harsh criticism for doing this? Absolutely. If it was my kid she called a racial slur, I would be pretty mad. However, I don't think it's a crime. But as I said, the video went viral and the internet ended up doxing her address, her phone number, and much worse, leaked her social security number. I imagine that this was also compounded by lots of threats because that's what usually happens in these cases. And so Shiloh started a Give, Send, Go campaign on May 1st to help her pay for some of the expenses of having all her information leaked. My name is Shiloh, and I've been put in a very dire situation. I recently had a kid steal from my 18-month-old son's diaper bag at a park. I called the kid out for what he was. Okay, so I don't think anyone's denying that this lady is at least a little bit racist, but trying to ruin a woman's entire life and threaten her safety because a word was said is inappropriate. Think of all the non-white people who constantly say racist shit and they receive no consequences at all. Think of stuff like this children's book here that teaches anti-white racism to kids, or this social experiment that British television did that taught kids based on a racist narrative. No one is having their lives ruined over those things, so maybe just have Shiloh apologize to the child and the family and have her take a course on how to manage undesirable behavior from children without calling them racial slurs. You know, have the punishment fit the crime. But since Karmelo Anthony got hundreds of thousands of dollars on Give, Send, Go for killing a student, and he was being glorified for doing that, and because Shiloh opened up her Give, Send, Go account just a couple weeks later, in response, the internet started donating to Shiloh like crazy, and we got some competitive racism in the form of charity. We had people on Team White donating $2,000 to help spell out the N-word, and people on Team Black were donating to share how they were happy that Karmelo ended the life of a white kid, until Give, Send, Go removed the ability to comment on both campaigns, which pissed a lot of people off because the comments were only removed after Shiloh began her campaign, and it was like a day after. Meanwhile, people had been saying racist shit and cheering on the stabbing of a white kid for weeks on Karmelo's page. Now, I will say that these comments are probably not good for the culture. However, the suggestion here is that black people can be as racist as they want towards white people, and no one cares. Meanwhile, when similar sentiments are thrown back, it's the end of the world, and now action has to be taken. This double standard is why people are mad. Both types of racism are bad, but only one gets punished. So far, Karmelo's campaign has raised $530,000, and Shiloh has raised $780,000, to which, I think in both cases, the money couldn't have gone to less deserving people. Obviously, I'm more sympathetic to Shiloh because her sin was far less severe. However, despite that the reaction to what she did was way out of line, I'm not a fan of a person being essentially rewarded with close to $1 million for doing a bad thing. But again, the reason that she got so much money is because of over a decade of unmitigated racism towards white people from the mainstream media, activists, colleges, politicians, and human resources departments. For over 10 years, people have been making some of the most evil and prejudiced accusations towards whites. However, if you say something reasonable like, hey, maybe don't drive a car while you're under the influence of fentanyl, they will have a meltdown and try to ruin your entire life. I mean, you had people saying shit like this on social media and nothing would happen, but if you said a man is a man on social media, then you could lose your livelihood. And the legacy media types are still trying to maintain this as the status quo. In response to the two fundraisers on Give, Send, Go, Piers Morgan did a panel and interviewed a co-founder of the website in a video where I can only imagine it was Piers' goal to increase racial tension.
In the case of Shiloh Hendrix, it seems to me pretty open and shut. This is a woman on camera repeatedly using the N-word, first of all with a 5-year-old autistic child, it seems, then an adult who's filming her, doesn't care, is blatantly racist. Why should someone like that be allowed to raise any money on your site if, as you say, you are driven by a Christian purpose?
Well, that's a fascinating question. I would almost flip it around. It's like if we tried to create litmus tests for everybody to come onto a platform to use it, I pretty much could guarantee nobody would pass the litmus test, because the reality of humanity is that we're broken.
So you would let anybody onto your platform to raise money for anything? Is that your position?
No, the position is that there are laws that define what is legal and what isn't legal, and we adhere to the laws as the framework for what is and isn't allowed.
Yes, that basically should be the line for all these social media websites. In fact, in America, legally, they're supposed to behave like Give, Send, Go to retain certain protections, but the government loves to not enforce the law. So in retaliation to this very reasonable point, it looks like Pierce's team has done some research and has found that Give, Send, Go is a Christian website, and because of that, there are certain behaviors that they actually don't allow.
Well, I'll say historically, we've stood on that principle of saying we're going to allow things that we disagree with.
Okay.
And we've allowed things that we completely disagree with.
Do you allow
on the
people
platform.
to do
But our
pro-abortion?
mission-
Do you allow pro-abortion fundraising?
Actually, there's two caveats to what Give, Send, Go has carved out, and one of them is it's broken into two pieces, but it's the protection of children. So we say we're going to protect children because they don't have a voice. So we're not going to allow fundraising for abortions on Give, Send, Go, and we're not going to allow fundraising for the transition of children.
Right, he's a hypocrite, which would have been a great gotcha moment for Piers if it wasn't for the fact that in many states, abortion and transitioning children is a crime. In fact, it seems like Piers is not very informed on U.S. law at all.
Inciting racial hatred is a crime, right?
Inciting racial hatred is a crime?
Yeah.
Where?
You don't think it's a crime?
In the U.S.?
Yeah, it is.
I've never seen that as a law on the books, but
it is.
That was part of the
reason.
reason.
I'm not even American, and I know it's a law on the books. You're not allowed to incite racial hatred or violence against ethnic groups based on their ethnicity. What could be a more glaring example than someone on camera calling black people the N-word?
Yeah, Piers, that's not a crime. I mean, groups like Antifa and BLM and news reporters, as well as a number of U.S. senators and congressmen, better hope that's not a crime, because they're going to jail if that's the case. And really, the most disgusting thing about modern social media is that you can do or say one bad thing, and you're banned forever. There's no path to redemption, and if you keep it like that, eventually people are going to see no reason to be good. Everyone does something bad at some point, so I strive to make amends for any wrongdoing if people will never accept you anyway.
3 years ago in New York City, in the middle of the city, there was an altercation between a woman and a black man over bird watching and dogs, and her name was Amy Cooper. And to this day, 3 years later, she hasn't been able to find a job. Because she made a bad mistake, saying the wrong thing in a particular moment where a camera was pulled out.
She racially abused him. If you racially abuse people, you are made accountable for your actions.
So for the rest of your life, the rest of your life, you're shut off from society.
If you call black people the N-word and racially abuse them, unfortunately, yes, it has consequences, probably for your professional life,
no, I'm not saying,
for the rest of your professional life.
We understand that there are consequences. Yeah. I understand there's consequences. What I'm saying is what you're advocating for, it seems, is that for the rest of Shiloh's life, she should be pushed into the recesses of society, and that she should not have a voice, that she should be canceled and silenced. This is what drives people to suicide. And it's this cancel culture mantra that thinks that the best way forward as a society is to cancel them rather than try to bring some redemption into the situation.
Yes, the constant double standards and the lack of ability to be redeemed is driving people insane. Basically, what Piers is saying is that if you do one bad thing, then you should die. Because what's the difference between saying that and telling people they have to starve because no company should ever hire them? This kind of mentality is exactly why Shiloh got so much money and why she got rewarded for doing something wrong. The ideas that Piers is spreading are only going to increase racism, and quite honestly, I don't think these people are stupid. I think they're doing it on purpose. Instead of spending time trying to understand his opponent's perspective, Piers spends the entire interview trying to get a gotcha moment on the Give, Send, Go co-founder, while completely ignoring the much worse thing that Karmelo Anthony did. All Piers does is talk about bad things that white people have done, and tries to frame the Give, Send, Go co-founder in the worst possible way.
I'm told that the Give, Send, Go site for Luigi Mangione, who we saw allegedly executing a healthcare boss in cold blood. I don't think there's much allegedly about it, but we'll let the process take its course. He's got nearly £1 million for his defence via your site. The bottom line, Mr. Wells, I appreciate you coming on, but the bottom line is The reality of the situation is that if you racially abuse a kid, you can become a millionaire on your site and you won't stop it happening. And if you kill somebody or allegedly kill somebody, you won't stop that happening either. But with your Christian hat on, if somebody wants to put anything up that's pro-abortion, whoa, not having that, Gov.
To be clear, when he said murderer, he meant Luigi, not Karmelo. I mean, it's really hard to pretend that you're trying to fix racism or racial abuse when you spend an hour saying that a woman's life should be over and she should be criminally prosecuted for saying a word, while completely ignoring the guy who provoked a fight and stabbed a high schooler because he didn't want to move to a different tent. One of these is 100 times worse than the other, and giving the harshest possible criticism to the less bad thing, while completely ignoring the other, makes you seem like a terrible person. Oh, but I guess it's okay because it's not possible to be racist against white people, right?
You know, this idea of equating of one side to the other side often loses track of this issue of power. To use his example, when Black people stand up and say, hey, let's build our own stuff. Hey, let's have a Black power movement. When a Black person says, hey, let's preserve our culture, I have no problem with Italians or Irish people or anyone else saying, let's preserve our culture. But when we don't talk about ethnicity, but actual race, and when white people say, let's preserve whiteness, it's an exclusionary practice. It's about preserving laws and practices and tactics that do harm to other people. A Black power movement was about opening stores and building businesses. A white power movement was about something very, 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 very different. A white power movement included lynchings and included Ku Klux Klan, et cetera. So let's not pretend that these are opposite sides of the same coin. When white people say, let's save our country, and even using language of our country, when Black people built this thing, when you say that, you're talking about forcing people out of the country. You're talking about laws that discriminate. You're talking about doing harm to people.
Right, because affirmative action doesn't exist, and the summer of 2020 never happened. Racist Black people have never caused a riot before, only a mostly peaceful protest. Someone in the comments pointed out that they censored every use of the N-word on Piers' show, but when white racial slurs were used, they weren't censored, which is true. They clearly think that one form of racism matters a lot less than the other, and when you have a two-tiered system like that, all you're going to do is increase racial hatred and increase racial prejudice. Also, the more you make every single negative interaction a race issue, the more the racial divide will increase. And like I said, I don't think that people like Piers or anyone else that has race grifted in this video is stupid. I think they're doing it on purpose. There's a lot of money to be made in race grifting, and from a political standpoint, the more we spend time fighting over dumb racial issues, the less we unite against corrupt politicians or corrupt business practices. And the crazy thing is that recently I saw a post that said this: Gen Z has no idea that back in the 90s, basically everyone just got along with race and stuff. It's really bad they don't know firsthand that was possible. Right. I grew up in the 90s and no one gave a shit about race. In fact, when I was 19, I worked at a job with a ton of Black people. We all got along, and in the 2.5 years that I worked there, no one brought up race. Racism was on life support, and we used to live in a country that was pretty free of racial prejudice until 2014 when colleges started performing CPR on racism by talking about microaggressions. But as I said, the good news is that everyone's getting tired of this. And I've also noticed a particular distaste coming from Black people. In fact, despite how many racists there were donating to Karmelo Anthony and cheering on the death of a white kid, it was actually much easier for me to find Black people criticizing all of this than any other race.
Makes my blood boil. Put that kid, Karmelo, put him under the jail. I don't want him to, I want his life to be over personally.
It's hard to put into words how upsetting this is, but I do not think Karmelo Anthony's bail should have been lowered from $1 million. In fact, I don't even think it should have been offered. I think he should be in jail right now.
Jeff McCabe had got swatted, 3 or 4 times? Threats sent to Hunter, his mom, but y'all make Karmelo out to be the victim and his family?
These aren't even all the Black people that I found saying they were tired of all the race baiting and BLM excusing crime while trying to make criminals look like heroes.
This young man is starting to become a complete scam.
It's been a scam since BLM, brother. BLM said, our mission is to destroy the nuclear family.
Right, BLM is not your friend. They want to destroy Black families. Do you know what happens to kids without a family structure? They get physically abused and sexually abused. They get put in gangs. They develop drug problems. This is terrible for Black people, like it would be terrible for any race. How can you say Black Lives Matter when you want to destroy Black families? And really, the best middle finger we can give to all these grifting assholes is to get along and be friends. I think actually one of the people that I clipped earlier who was a therapist made a good point.
Sadly, many young people today have no conflict resolution skills. They're taught to fight. They're taught if one person touches you, you better double it. They say if they push you, make sure they don't get up from the fight. And this is such a prevalent mentality that I've seen in all races.
Well, it's that or cancel culture behavior where you get ousted from the group for making one misstep instead of talking it out with everyone. All of this is about conflict resolution. The worse we are at that, the more society will suck. The reality is that both the Shiloh and the Karmelo situations could have been easily solved with the most basic conflict resolution skills. Instead of calling the kid the N-word, Shiloh could have simply realized that kids of all races don't really have a strong sense of personal property until they hit a certain age, and with that idea in mind, she could have just said, hey, don't do that, and moved on with her life. As for Karmelo, all he had to do was say, oh, I'm under the wrong tent? My bad, I'll move. Easy. Everyone needs to calm down and handle conflict as politely as possible. Look to de-escalate and find peaceful solutions whenever they're available.
We gotta care about each other. We gotta be kind to each other. You need to show compassion, show empathy, not anger, not rage.
The world needs more kind people. If you can't find one, be one.
Stop being so hostile and start searching for common ground. That is how these big cultural issues will get resolved, and instead of looking for excuses to hate or dislike each other, we should be looking for excuses to get along. Last, for everyone crying it's over, the race war has begun and there's no going back, realize that because there's so much agreement from all races right now, and because there's so much dislike of all the bad actors, this whole event between Shiloh and Karmelo could actually be one of the biggest moments of unity. Now is not the time to divide people based on race. It's time to work together to get rid of all the people who profit from when we fight each other. Anyway, thanks for watching, follow me on Twitter, and I'll see you in the next video.